Okay, well, good morning. Today is July 17th, 2011. This is Apostle John Welty with Second Eighth Week Ministries, and I'm coming to you from Alford, Iowa, in the United States. And we are going to be continuing on here in 1 Peter chapter 3, picking up back where we left off there at verse 7. And just to recap quick, okay, you'll notice that that Peter, Chief Apostle Peter here, has not changed his subject matter. Okay, he didn't complete his beginning thoughts and then change over. The chapter breaks in these epistles were done after the fact. Okay, that this isn't like a new chapter, okay, in his letter. Okay, this is one epistle that he wrote, and it's been broken into different sections, okay, to make it easier to read. Okay, but he's not changing subjects. Okay, Peter was addressing the faith of the people. Okay, as an apostle of the covenant of Jesus Christ, okay, he was giving knowledge to direct faith, okay, into the things of the covenant, the sanctified things of the covenant, and he was confirming the pattern that God set for our overcoming, okay, for our faith to follow with the sanctified tools of the priesthood, okay, in order to increase the kingdom of God, to increase the substance of that kingdom, okay, which only takes place through fruit bearing. Okay, so the apostle, his focus is set upon the work of Christ within the heart, which is our true hope is Christ. Okay, he wasn't directing the people, okay, into setting their hope, okay, in the natural order, okay, but in the order of the kingdom of God. Okay, that they would seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Okay, that they would put faith first, okay, and continue to focus upon these things. And it's with the things of the covenant that we build by faith. And he hasn't, like I said, the subject matter hasn't changed. Okay, and there at the end of chapter 2, okay, where he was talking about, he began talking about the pattern of honor and affection. Okay, just as the church is subject to Christ, okay, and the Son is subject to the Father. Okay, we followed the same pattern. Okay, so Peter is addressing faith in the church, isn't he? Okay, and like I said, I believe it was last week there, that Jesus did the same thing, is providing different examples for comparison in order to help us understand, okay, the subject matter, because he's speaking of a kingdom which is invisible, isn't he? Okay, so just as you see in Mark chapter 4, verse 30, where Jesus said, "Whereunto shall we liken the kingdom of God, or with what comparison shall we compare it?" Okay, and Jesus made over 11, comparisons in the Gospel of Matthew there, in order to try to, to bridge our understanding, something that we can all identify with. Okay, in order to use that as a point of comparison. Okay, and so it's interesting because some people like to think that that in the scriptures, when you read about the kingdom of God and read about the powers and the principalities and all these things, they like to say that that's the metaphor. Okay, well, that's not the metaphor. The metaphors are using things that we're familiar with as a metaphor in order to understand that which is just as real, okay, but not as real to our senses apart from the Spirit. Okay, the Spirit has to make these things known to us, has to reveal these things to us. Okay, so we use that which you are naturally familiar with. Okay, being born into the kingdom of darkness. Okay, that which you're naturally familiar with is those things that death enters into. Okay, but you're familiar with those things, and we can understand. We can see a pattern in these things, and with that, we can then understand. Okay, with some instruction. Okay, those things of the invisible kingdom, which death does not enter into. Okay, so it's not that the things of the Spirit are metaphors. Okay, the things of the Spirit are that which is real. Okay, that which you can see and touch and taste, here now, okay, is temporal. Okay, that's temporary. So from the perspective of God and from the perspective of an eternal perspective, it's it's like a note of scratch paper, right? You jot down a thought on it, okay, and then once you don't need it anymore, you throw it away. It's not all that important, is it? Okay, and yes, it's real, but it's just got a temporary purpose. Well, the same thing is with everything here. Okay, this everything in this dimension has a temporary purpose. Okay, now is the time for the testing of our hearts. Okay, that the Lord is uh, set a scenario of contradiction here. Okay, between light and darkness. Okay, that those of faith may exercise their faith. Okay, with the wisdom and the knowledge of God. Okay, using those things that He has sanctified for their faith, showing their faith through subjection, through submission. Okay, and that through grace and suffering we would overcome. Okay, through grace and suffering we would taste of the fruit of His kingdom. Okay, through the sanctified things of the Spirit, which remember Peter talked about in chapter 1 of our overcoming by faith. Okay, he spoke of the baptism of the Spirit. Okay, instruction and doctrine. Okay, and our continuance in the covenant, didn't he? All right, so with these things, and then he also spoke of our of the testing of our faith, right, being more precious than gold. Okay, again, using the purification of gold through fire as a metaphor. Okay, not that the testing of our faith is metaphorical. That's quite real. Okay, the birthing of the fruit of Christ in our faith, okay, as we overcome through the things of the Spirit is very real. Okay, but it's not something that the carnal-minded experience, so they don't understand it, so they dismiss it as being a metaphor. Okay, instead they try to say, well, how can we apply this to our lives today? Well, you don't apply it to your lives today. You apply it to your faith. In fact, you apply your faith to that knowledge. Okay, but that begins with instruction and doctrine, which is why we need apostles. Okay, Apostle Peter here was talking to those whom he had stewarded the gospel and truth to. Okay, he had laid the foundation of truth in their hearts. They had been prepared with truth in the heart to serve God, and he was able to speak from that foundation knowledge. Okay, that they would be able to draw from that foundation knowledge to understand what he's sharing here. So they weren't confused by this. Okay, what the confusion comes into place when people today, coming from a carnal perspective, not an eternal perspective, okay, who are not working with the Spirit of God, which is key, okay, but they're working with an earthbound spirit. They then try to interpret these things privately, okay, and their interpretation then is a reflection of themselves, okay, not a reflection of Christ, but a reflection of themselves because they read it from a identifying their own perspective and their own likes and dislikes, okay, to confirm their own principle, okay, to provide fuel for their own aspiration, okay, and so by precept and line they fall backwards, okay, not forwards, which is what Prophet Isaiah shared. Okay, by precept and line you fall backwards because they are creating a light, they're creating their own light, okay, instead of working with the Spirit of God, okay, which provides the illumination of His grace. Okay, instead of working with grace, they're working with their own fire. They're building their own fire to light their own way, which you'll find in Isaiah, and that is great darkness. Okay, because they say we have light. Okay, so they have no need for grace, so they dismiss the government of God. But they're in great error with that. So this is where the great darkness is. Okay, it's they that say that they have a light that are actually in darkness. So let's go on here in chapter 3, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, where he says, likewise, you husbands, dwell with them, being your wives, okay, according to knowledge, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, okay, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Okay, when he says likewise, he said the same thing in verse 1 here, right? Likewise, the same pattern, honor and affection, the same pattern, likewise. Okay, and he says according to knowledge, or in other words, reflecting upon the work of Christ in the waters of the soul through grace, peace, and mercy. Okay, what do we find there? Equity. Okay, there is equity between the waters of the soul. Okay, the soul. Well, you can think of. I don't have a whiteboard handy to draw it out, but you can think of, to understand the spirit and the soul and the will of man. Okay, that if you draw a large circle, like say, the size of a saucer, like a coffee saucer type of thing, or a teacup saucer. if you draw a circle, okay, and then inside that, draw a smaller circle, like the size of, you know, maybe about half that size. Okay, and then inside that you can draw like a dime-sized circle. Okay, so you got three circles, right? Well, that inner circle, well, the larger circle is the soul. Okay, uh, well, the first circle that you drew, okay, because there's two larger circles. The first circle that you drew is the spirit. Okay, the middle circle, okay, which is the second largest, okay, that's the soul. Okay, and the smallest circle, that's the will. Okay, so the spirit contains the soul, which contains the will. Okay, and the will is your very power. That's okay. That's the essence of your being. So the equity, okay, which exists between the spirit and the soul, okay, is only possible through the work of Christ within the heart. And this is where you see the struggle that people very readily identify with. Okay, they feel that there's a struggle between the spirit and the soul. Okay, between the emotional center, which is the soul, and the intellectual center, which is of the spirit. Okay, and they struggle in that, and they think that that's the struggle of faith. It's not the struggle of faith at all. Okay, but the equity that is found within the inner man is only when the peace of God is present. Okay, which is present only when grace is gaining entrance. Okay, so truth is in the heart. Grace is gaining entrance. Okay, you're exercising your faith with the sanctified contact points of the covenant. Therefore, grace is gaining entrance through these contact points. Okay, and because you are exercising your faith with those things that God has sanctified, okay, you're expressing your agreement with God. You are conforming your faith, okay, to the terms and the conditions of the present covenant, okay, which is the new covenant of Jesus Christ. Okay, and because of this, the grace of God gaining entrance, faith being drawn from the heart, the peace of God is present. Okay, you experience equity within. Okay, because the soul is being impacted with substance. Okay, and the spirit, okay, is finding agreement with this knowledge. All right, therefore there is equity. And this equity is only possible when that power of the spirit is present. There has to be that power present in order for that equity to be present. Okay, so this is why Apostle Peter began here speaking of the things of the Spirit, the priesthood, okay, all of these things through which we experience this equity. Okay, and that's what he's continued to focus upon. That's Christ in the soul. That's Christ in the heart, ruling in the heart. So when people talk about that Christ rules on the throne in my heart, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to experience it. Okay, when you talk to them about their experience of faith, it becomes evident that Christ is not ruling. Okay, that they don't know what that means. They don't know how to have Christ rule in their hearts. They just know that He's supposed to be ruling in their hearts. Okay, and they feel that if they say it, it's going to happen. Well, that's not the way it works, is it? Okay, but what we're talking about is through the covenant knowledge, okay, through the covenant tools, okay, and through spiritual government, we're instructed in these things, okay, that we can know how to, okay, keep covenant with God, how to avoid offending God, okay, and as grace is gaining entrance, and the peace of God is present, okay, through as we are keeping covenant with God, okay, our faith is actively being governed by Him, that Christ is ruling in the heart, okay, not because we say He's ruling in the heart, but because we're experiencing that, okay. Therefore, when we talk about Christ ruling in our hearts, we're not projecting, okay, a promise. We are testifying to an experience, the reality. Okay, there's a big difference, isn't there? And we're able to actually reflect upon how Christ governs the heart, okay, and gain wisdom and understanding from that, which is what Apostle Peter's talking about right here, actually. Okay, so in other words, how have we learned Christ? Okay, how are we experiencing Christ? Okay, well, we're experiencing Christ through this equity, aren't we?